Good afternoon. Thank you for attending this webinar on the legislative outlook for 2026. I'm David Carlucci, a member of the ILRAA Alumni Board and the chair of the Affinity Group for Government Affairs Professionals. And the idea here today is to talk with lawmakers about what we could expect in the upcoming legislative session in Albany. And we're fortunate that we have both a Republican and a Democrat to give us some different ideas and different perspectives of some of the issues that we might not be really thinking about, what's on their mind, what's on the mind of lawmakers as they're getting ready for the legislative session. And we're fortunate that also this will be very nonpartisan and informal. And we're looking forward to having our lawmakers, tell us about some of the things that they're working on, or more broadly about how they expect the legislative session to go. And as all of you probably are aware, the School of the Industrial Labor Relations at Cornell was started by an act of the New York State Legislature. And the Ives building where we went to school is named after Senator Ives that served in the state legislature in the 30s and the 40s. So it is pretty fitting that we have both a state senator and an assembly member to give us this overview and talk about some of the things that they're working on, both big and small. So first, I want to introduce our Assemblyman, Pat Carroll. Pat was elected to the New York State Assembly in November of 2024. So he's very new to the legislature, but it will give us a good perspective of someone, with those fresh set of eyes in the Capitol. He's a graduate of Northwestern Law School and Wesleyan University. Patrick has been practicing attorney since 2008, admitted in New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and previously served as legal counsel to the Rhode Island Department of Corrections and Rhode Island State Senate Labor Committee. And he also served on the Clarkstown Town Council from 2017 until he was elected last year in 2024. And we're very fortunate that we have Senator Bill Weber as well, and he represents the 38th Senate District, which is entirely in Rockland County. It's the towns of Clarkstown, Haverstraw, Orangetown, and Ramapo. He's a lifelong resident of Rockland County, and he's one of only 2 New York State certified public accountants in the state legislature. And he's a graduate of Pace University and holds a BA in public accountancy and is a member of the AICPA. Prior to serving in the Senate, he worked as a chief financial officer for a medium-sized family-run business. Additionally, he's a Cub Scout leader and a board member for both the Mental Health Association and the Rockland County Youth Bureau. So we're really excited to have you guys, and we'll get right into it to talk about some of the top priorities as we head into the legislative session. So I guess I'll turn it over to the Assemblyman to start about in terms of from the Assembly. What do you think will be some of the top issues that are on lawmakers' minds as we're heading up to the Capitol in January?
Thank you so much, David. It is an honor to be here. I appreciate the work you all are doing. As you made a point, this is going into my second session. Actually, next week I'll be in office for 1 year. I get elected into an open spot, so I actually was sworn in on the 9th, we believe. So we're looking at the calendar today. So it's a little bit different this year because I know what to expect. I mean, I don't know, you have some years up there as well. I don't know if you can ever imagine everything to what you're going to expect. But I think that, the challenge for all members, both sides of the aisle in Albany this session, is to make sure that we're standing up for the everyday New Yorkers we represent and work towards making things more affordable. Everyone is feeling the challenges, whether they be in their insurance bills or their grocery bills or things like that. And I think that balancing the needs of the residents that we all represent, as well as ensuring the services and the support for the people in need, are going to be the challenges we face more this year than any other year. The federal government, made some huge cuts to the New York's federal funding. This year, we're down $750 million. I believe next year's budget is anticipated to be billions of shortfall. So I think that's a challenge we're all going to be faced as we run into this legislative session.
Yeah, and Senator Weber, what do you think are some of the issues that are top and center on everyone's mind? And I figure we would start with that, and then as we talk more, we could talk a little bit more about the nuance in terms of maybe legislation that might not be on everyone's horizon. But yeah, what do you think are some of the big issues that have to be tackled? One of the first things in the legislative session this year.
Sure. Thank you, David, and thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be on this forum, and it's great to be with my assembly colleague, Pat Carroll. It's great to be here to talk about such important issues. I think Pat, obviously talked about some of the really important issues in terms of what we hear from our constituents about the cost of insurance, right, and how it's skyrocketed over the years. And yeah, the federal changes are going to have a huge impact on the state budget, not only this coming year, but for all the out years as well. So I think there's going to be a big push to make sure that we shore up any shortfalls that we're going to have. And then we also have to look at, really maintaining the status quo on a lot of great work that has been done over the last few years. I look at foundation aid where, the changes to the formula, substantial changes were made to the formula last year, and we want to make sure that, those changes remain implemented and we have no rollback on terms of school aid, because I think most people will, especially in Rockland County, will say that, their largest bill, if you're a homeowner, is your property tax bill, and a large portion of that, 75% of it, is their school taxes. So making sure that the education aid that comes down to the school districts remains strong, so that those local taxes can remain the same. So I think you're going to see really just we'll see what the executive budget comes out. I guess we'll get some hints of it maybe later this month. We'll start getting more details on it in January. But I think a lot of it's going to be, how do we deal with the federal impact? How do we deal with some other economic slowdowns that we may be seeing in the economy? And how do we really put together a budget that does no harm, I guess, going forward this year?
Yeah, I think what's on a lot of people's minds is, as we had the local elections this year, we had, town council members up, supervisors, county executives, county legislatures, New York City, the city council, the mayor, and a big highlight was the New York City mayoral election. And we heard Zoran Mandami, the mayor-elect, talk about some priorities in terms of issues that we know will have to go through Albany if he wants them to be successful. We've heard a lot of issues on raising taxes, whether it's the personal income tax or the corporate tax. What do you guys think about that issue? And not necessarily your personal point of view, but what do you think how is this debate going to evolve? And one thing I wanted to add for our listeners is that this year, the entire state legislature and the governor are up for election. So how does that also change the calculus in terms of how members are going to, position themselves, and how serious of an issue do you think this will be?
Pat, you want to? I'll take it. I'll take
Um,
it from there. I'll
okay.
start. So, from what I've at least listened to post election, the Governor Hochul met with Mamdani to discuss, I think, some of his wish list items. He wants corporate taxes to be increased. He wants surcharges on wealthier individuals. She sounded like she originally was against it. Now she's maybe open-minded into listening to it. But yeah, it depends, how much of a threat that she feels, I guess, in terms of a primary, or how her polling numbers look, to see how much leeway she'll have in terms of raising taxes. I know she said that she was against, those particular tax increases all throughout last year. But we'll see what happens post Mamdani's election. I can imagine that our conference, the Republican conference, and I'll say in the Senate, I won't speak for the Assembly, but I would say they're probably in agreement that, they're going to say that it's not the right time to raise taxes drastically on corporations and individuals, especially in an economy that can get a little weaker. And depending on what New York City policies get implemented by the incoming mayor, is that going to have an effect on, I guess, businesses and real estate values and things of the sort? So I think a lot of it's up in the air, but I think we'll see as I said earlier, as the executive budget comes out, we'll see, what policies and changes she wants to make.
Thank you, Senator. I think that similar trends. I think that it's again a balancing. Both Senator Weber and I represent portions of Rockland County. We're talking about teachers, nurses, police officers. We're not talking about the top 1%. There may be a few. They're not, but I don't think there's too many people who have their income described with the first letter B. So I think a balancing of no one wants to raise taxes. No one can sit in this seat or these seats and say I'm in favor of taxes because we're not. But again, with the shortfalls on the federal government, we're going to have to find some money somehow to fill the holes of the state budget, and either we cut spending elsewhere, but unfortunately, people are accustomed to a certain level of services, or we find new sources of revenue. The goal would be to find the new sources of revenue by way of businesses coming in, but we have to have that balance. And the thing I'm thinking about, David, and you probably saw it when your years in the Assembly, I'm sorry, in the Senate, every time someone gets elected, whether it be the mayor of New York or a city councilor or somewhere else, I just look at the seniority and the seat shuffle that's going to happen. Because right now, already with the mayor-elect Mandami, city councilor Harvey Epstein, and others, there's already going to be 2 or 3 vacancies just starting into January. So we all, for the people listening, it's all about where your seat is. So that thing affects us as well too.
Yeah, that's something that's really interesting, the turnover, right? I know when I got elected in 2010, the seats didn't change that much, right? People were there for a really long time. And now you're seeing more and more turnover. And particularly what you said about some of the members moving on, the mayor-elect, council members. I know in the state Senate, we have Brad Hoylman, who will be Manhattan Borough President. We've got
Sean Ryan,
Mayor of Buffalo. And I think there's maybe some other.
You're right, and you also see a couple. I think you've heard Senator Ramos. I think is going to have a primary challenge potentially. I think not potentially. I think for sure.
Yeah.
So you'll see. I think you're going to see some primaries on that end that could even further tip the balance, or at least have people maybe shift their views on certain things to accommodate some sort of political advantage.
And maybe
I think I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes. But then I think others, see someone like Assembly Member Billy Jones, who represents the northern counties. He just moved to a different opportunity. I think that there's folks here, and I'm newish to the game, and not the game, the newest to the scene in Albany, and I really enjoy it. I really like in representing the people of the 96th, which is where I represent. But some folks are realizing that the politics have changed. It's a little bit more divisive than it ever was before, and I think some folks are thinking about, is it worth going to Albany and leaving our families half the year for the majority of the work week to go up there. I mean, I still thoroughly enjoy it. I intend to do this for a while if the residents of the 96th will have me. But there is going to be some turnover with people saying, look, I can do other things. And it is interesting.
Yeah, and the way that we see, particularly with the Democratic Socialists of America, talking about primarying members, there's a lot of thought that maybe that will incentivize people to maybe not run again, and not just from the DSA, but from other members. And maybe you guys could comment on this. Something that listeners might not know is that now in New York State, we have publicly financed campaigns. And that's an opportunity for members to raise money and have it matched with funds so that they can compete. And now you guys have both had to run for election with that system. When I served, we didn't have matching funds. So it's interesting to see, and I know Senator Weber had the opportunity to run before that was in place, after when it was in place. Maybe you guys could speak to that. How does that change the dynamic of people running for office, and then just how they serve in elected office? Have you noticed any change or anything that might be insightful to our listeners in terms of publicly financed campaigns?
Well, I would say, it makes things easier, right? When you have a bucket of money. In our case on the Senate, we could max out, I think, at $375,000. It's hard to tell taxpayers, especially in tough times, that we're going to publicly finance campaigns and put money towards, potentially helping an incumbent or a challenger win an election. But everyone's using the system now, so it's like you're not going to just not opt out. You just opt out and not use the system. So I would say it's given a lot of candidates maybe the opportunity to run when they normally wouldn't have run because as you can imagine, and as you know, it's very expensive to run for office these days. You not only with the matching funds, you got to raise a tremendous amount of money above that just to run any kind of competitive race, especially in the the tri-state area, really in the suburbs where we are is really a New York media market. But I think it gives people the opportunity. I know we made some changes this year in this year's budget that I think maybe helped the system out a little bit. It was a little difficult, especially when you have a max of $250. You had some people that maybe would give you a few extra dollars and you'd have to refund it. It becomes a big paperwork and administrative nightmare. But the jury's still out on how successful it is or isn't. But it's the system that we put into place a number of years ago, and I think everyone's going to play by these new rules and take it to their advantage as much as they can.
I think that and I agree with the senator. They did work out some of the wrinkles. I mean, I've never seen it the prior way. I opted in and I fundraised with the matching donations. So it does incentivize folks for getting $5 donations. And unfortunately, a lot of this job is fundraising. Obviously, not in our government office, but off hours when we're campaigning. It does help you ask for money because it's a lot easier to ask someone for $20 as opposed to a $2,000 donation or whatnot. Whereas the matching funds make that $20, it would make it $240 with the times 12 on the $0 to $50 is literally matched by a times 12, and then it's graduated up to $250 for the match. I'm not sure if it changes the way people govern. I mean, fundraising and getting elected have always been part of this. I think it kind of helps a new candidate, I gather. Now that I'm an incumbent, I hope no one decides to run. But, when I started running, I didn't think I had to raise, $250,000 by myself. We raised a good amount. We were able to get matching funds. And I think we collected $150,000 in matched funds from the state. And I'll share also as the last part what the senator said. It is kind of interesting for a taxpayer knowing that some money that they're paying towards their taxes are paying for me to send out mail to the district when I'm trying to get reelected. But it's the system we have, and I guess if it gets more people involved, it's probably a good thing, just as long as it's not wasted. And I will say, and then this is the real last piece on this part. There is a lot of oversight. They go through with a fine-tooth comb your records. They want you to have qualifying expenses, otherwise you have to refund money. So there is oversight on that money when you are matched.
Right, and a certain percentage automatically get audited every year, right? I forgot what that is. I think it's something like 25%. It's a high number.
Several people I knew got audited. I was glad because my record keeping is I forget the movie I'm thinking of, but where every drawer there's receipts and you have to try to figure out. Now, I'm not an accountant like Senator Weber.
No, but I think you put the nail on the head, Pat. There's audits, there's checks and balances in place. We made some tweaks this year. Who knows? Next year they'll probably make some other tweaks or administrative changes as well. But it's a system that's in place, and anyone that's going to run for office, I would say, as long as you keep the proper documentation and you substantiate all of your your donations and your receipts and expenses, it's a system that everyone should really take advantage of to the extent that they can.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. This year will be the first year that the statewide elected officials will participate. So you got the governor, you've got the attorney general, the state comptroller. And it's interesting because I've seen a couple candidates pop their head up for state controller. And I'm wondering if there is that combination of the public funds that makes it more enticing to run. So we'll see. And that's a race that usually is not too sexy. People don't talk about it. And there hasn't really been competitive races for state comptroller. So it will be interesting to see if that does get highlighted, if there's more money to talk about the issues. We'll have to watch that really closely.
The one thing I would add too that you did kind of jog my memory. Now with the whole system of even your elections being in place for next year, I'm sure Pat knows the same thing. Our calendars are filling up with a fundraiser every single day. So maybe.
So, Bill, can you tell us a little bit about that?
The state law was changed. It was challenged in court, and then the courts really decided on it, I guess, few months ago that local races, town supervisors, in our case, and town councilmen in Clarkstown, because if it's the 1 year cycle, will have to run again this coming year to get them on cycle for even year elections. So it's something that's new. You're going to have a very clogged political system this year in terms of not only fundraising, but mail and so many other facets of a campaign, that maybe the matching funds will help some candidates, because now you're not necessarily always going after the same dollars, because
Mm.
there's only so much that people are willing or able to donate.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you have so many races now that everyone's going to be coming and asking for money on the various races. So I don't
So
know if you
as of
already know
right
that.
now, we
Yeah,
can expect that local races that were typically done in an odd year will be moved to an even year
right.
starting in 26. So
Yeah,
people that even got elected in 2025 this November will be on the ballot again in 2026.
6.
So we'll have a very crowded ballot where it's usually just the state legislature, the governor or the president, and members of Congress, maybe some judges, depending on where you are. But now you'll have a full slate of local town electeds. So that'll be really interesting. Something I wanted to pivot to. We were talking about some of the hot button issues we heard in 2025. We heard in New York City the mayor-elect talking about free buses. And I wanted just to talk about that in terms of the MTA, right? The Metropolitan Transit Authority. And something that a lot of people might not recognize is the fact that here we have two suburban members outside of New York City, but are entirely within the MTA region. And what that means is that these members and the people that live in that region are responsible for funding the MTA. So something like the free bus issue is not something that just impacts New York City, but the surrounding counties that have to participate in the MTA region. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's going on with the MTA, how this desire for free buses, and then also maybe how the issue of the federal government, as many people in this meeting might know, that President Trump recently paused or stopped the project we call the Gateway Project, which is close to a $20 billion project that is doing tunnels under the Hudson River. And it would also do a program in Secaucus called the Bergen Loop that would give people west of the Hudson a one-seat ride into Manhattan. So, with that, is there any, color you could provide to us in terms of, how you guys will be looking at that, and how other members will be approaching, issues like transportation when it comes to the MTA, and then maybe even beyond that, with all these other issues that we have to think about with transportation?
Bill, if you don't mind,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
David just asked a 7-part question.
Loaded,
No,
yes.
no, I think that the issue with the MTA, and I think I could probably speak for the senator as well. People in Rockland, as you alluded to, don't get a one-seat ride to the city. So if people want to commute to New York City from here, they either have to drive across the bridge into Westchester, to Tarrytown, wherever it may be, and take the train, the MTA, down to the city, Grand Central, and then go their separate way, or they have to use New Jersey transit lines down into Secaucus or Hoboken, and then take a train over from there. So I think there's a difficulty here thinking about funding more free services for the MTA for folks in the city. Granted, we know Rocklanders will use those services once they get into the city, but the idea of funding more services for people in the city while we don't get the services that we deserve is kind of a difficult pill to swallow. In our conference in the Assembly, there's 103 Democratic Assembly members, and we range. Obviously, we're all on the same side of the aisle, so to speak, but we range in political views from both sides of the party, whatever those sides may be. We're on both sides, and I think that again, the leadership has been effective in balancing. A suburban member like myself, yes, we like in concept some of the ideas that come out of the city, but in reality, we know that the people in Rockland, aren't going to fund things that don't help them. So I think it's a balance. That Bergen Loop would have been huge. I think not only would it have increased people to be interested in working here. Usually the people live in Rockland and work in the city, but maybe if there's a one-seat ride, it'll be the opposite, where people come into work and we can expand our business base. But also, I think the property values and the values of our communities would have gone up with that. So hopefully that gets back on the table. But the MTA is a tough thing. Just as an aside, you take something like universal kindergarten, which was a fight. My predecessor, Ken Zabrowski, and David, you were probably with that as well, to kind of expand the opportunities. The city's had universal pre-K, and I think they're going to 3K possibly in the near future. So these things that are great in concept, we need to make sure that every New Yorker gets their fair share. So hopefully the MTA, if it goes free busing, maybe we can get some buses over the bridge so people can catch the train down to the city.
Right. Pat's right on all those issues. I think I was, as many people were disappointed that the federal government stopped the Gateway project and the Bergen Loop. I would hope that gets revisited and restarted up soon. I think that'll be a game changer for people that live in the Hudson Valley. I think people in the Hudson Valley, and I'm a big proponent of it, I think people would use public transportation, especially into the city and to all other, maybe entertainment places that they want to go into the city, or for work, or for other purposes. But it's just not reasonable. I have a daughter that goes into the city. Some of the times the train is at really really difficult times of the day. You can't get in and out of the city and back and forth throughout the day. So there's so many issues with that one seat, not having that one seat ride, and really not having reliable and consistent service into the city by train. But I hope that Gateway project and the Bergen Loop, I think would really benefit in Rockland County by that. And it's unfortunate. I think years ago, I know you were there in the Senate, and I know you advocated a lot for, I'm sure, train service or some sort of service across the new bridge that was built. Maybe that was a missed opportunity. I know the funding wasn't there. That would have been just such a huge add-on. But again, that would have been a game changer as well. But yeah, when you bring up the MTA in Rockland County, it's like the third rail of politics if you say anything nice about the MTA. So we don't, because we know it's whatever we're paying, it's unfair in terms of what services we're getting back. And I think people latch onto that and understand that, every time that the MTA raises their taxes or says that they're going to have free busing in the city, or some other major train or rail upgrade in New York City, people here say, well, what about the upgrades up here? And I remember asking Jenna Lieber, 2 years ago in a committee meeting, what about Rockland? Do you have any plans to upgrade or update the lines, or the stations here? And he said no. And then obviously he gets into the whole debate about New Jersey Transit. So, there's no serious attempt to help Rocklanders with that. So Rocklanders aren't really buying into anything to do with the MTA.
And that's
And
really the
just
pull of West Hudson. Yeah. Please, Pat.
Oh, just tack on something like congestion pricing. I
Yeah.
mean, for my once in a while trip into the city, yeah, it's great. I don't pay it every day, and traffic is better. But for the people who have to commute because there's no other option, they're working, third shift at a hospital and they need to go down, or whatever it may be, fire precinct or whatnot. It doesn't work for them. So again, we get the tax, but we don't get the benefit. And that's something I think that any suburban member of the Assembly or the Senate will have to deal with moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, just so viewers had that understanding that when the mayor of New York City is talking about transit, that it really has to be a collaborative conversation with assembly members and senators like yourselves that have the same type of influence into the MTA, but aren't getting those services. So I think that's something really interesting that we'll all be watching closely to see how that is navigated. Something I wanted to bring up is, this time of year, bills are sent to the governor, and the governor either signs them or does a veto. And there's about 200 bills that are currently awaiting the governor's signature or some action. And wanted to ask you guys how the legislature thinks about that, and what you're looking for, what you're anticipating as you wait for the governor's actions. Another little tidbit of information is that in New York, we have a process called the chapter amendment, where the legislature and the governor can make an agreement to amend a bill so that the governor doesn't veto it. So I wanted to ask you guys: do you have any bills that you're actively waiting for, either the governor to veto, to sign, to do an amendment, and what? How do you approach this process?
I'll take a crack at it. So, I was proud to get 14 bills passed through the Senate this year. 12 of those bills had an assembly, also passed in the assembly, and I think there's one bill out of those 12. So she signed 11. I think the 12th bill is a bill that Pat and I carried, Assemblyman Carroll, it's a local bill related to the Thiel's Firehouse, a retro tax exemption. So yeah, I'm lucky enough to say that 11 of 12, and I expect her to fully sign that one. So 12 out of 12 that passed both houses will be signed into law. Why she has a couple of hundred, I don't know. I guess she likes to burn the midnight oil on December 31st. It's not something I would do, but I assume that there's still those couple of controversial bills related to, the medical aid in dying and some other bills that I think she's giving thought to. So maybe that she wants to have a lot of bills all at once so that she can kind of figure out how she's going to handle those other bills. But yeah, I can't speak to why all those other, I know there's some local bills in those 200 bills. So I don't know how many will just really fly through like she does. I think she passed 60 some odd bills recently or last week or 2 weeks ago. So I think that number may sound large, but I think a lot of it will get eaten away quickly as they're sent to her desk.
Yeah, something I learned over the years was I try to pay attention, particularly the previous week, right? Black Friday or the day before Thanksgiving. You usually find some reports dropped or some bills signed or vetoed, but I didn't really see anything too abnormal. Maybe you guys did, but that's something where I'm paying close attention. But because I in previous years, the governor would say, "Oh, we finally released that report that you've been looking for," and it would be on Black Friday, a day where most people aren't paying attention. But Assemblyman Carroll, how are you approaching this period of time, and being that it's your first time through this process?
Yeah, actually, I was just gonna, David, we're gonna add it to the list of things that you think you should tell me or be telling me as I go through. But it was interesting last year, just about this time, and we're about to do it at the end of the week. The majority conference in the assembly, they're going on a conference time, so it's 2 or 3 days of everyone getting together offsite from government property. To talk about what we're trying to do in this session. And last year, I literally was brand new and I didn't know. I mean, I knew how a bicameral legislature worked, and I knew what we're in theory going to be doing. But the terminology being used by the members when they were complaining about how things work, I had no idea. I'd be asking questions like, "What are they talking about? Why are they complaining about that?" And now this could be added to it because the governor's office, and I'm sure it's happened with every single governor on both sides of the aisle. They ask for priorities of what bills you want signed that have been passed, and you say, "Okay, can you do this one?" A lot of people are asking me about this one. Can you do this one? And literally, you have no idea why yours doesn't get to the top, or why it's on the bottom, or why it's in the middle. So yeah, we got most of ours signed, or several of ours signed. There is one big one we have about. I'm hoping that some of the people listening are from the suburban areas and they have these programs. It's not all just city folks. We have no idea what you're talking about. But we have what's called an auxiliary police department, very active in the town of Clarkstown, which is the majority of my district. So we passed something that years ago, volunteer firefighters got a property tax exemption for volunteer hours. We're talking about hundreds of hours a year that these folks put in. So we put in a bill that, and it got passed through both houses to give a property tax exemption to auxiliary police. And they're the ones who are at the street fairs and the 4th of July fireworks or a big event in town. Not on the books as a paid police officer, but volunteering to crowd control and keep us safe. And that's something I really want to roll out, and I think it'd be a good end of the year thing of support for the auxiliary. It just hasn't been signed yet. And then every time I talk to someone, I'm like, "Why can't you sign this now?" So
tell us, how will that bill work? Is it it's a property tax exemption on the town, county?
Yeah, it would be the town would have to do it. It wouldn't be, it would help because obviously every dollar helps. It would be a fractional piece of an assessment, so property tax for that particular person. I think they have to be in, do 5 years. So you don't want people just sticking a toe in the water to save on their tax bill next year. But 5 years, and the town has to pass it. And I think it would help because first responders and first responder volunteers, I think, are people we want to encourage to be involved. And so it's a no-brainer. I think it's going to get signed. It's just I don't know why not.
And it would be limited to the town, right?
Yeah,
Not schools.
Yeah, just the town.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember I had put in a bill years ago to allow a property tax exemption for veterans in our school districts. And it was something that the city of New York really didn't like, and a bunch of districts did not like that. And so didn't think it was going to pass. Some things happened and it did pass. But the way that the bill was structured was that then we had to lobby the school districts to allow this. So the school board had to vote. And it was an interesting process. And I see this in many different bills where, you pass a law, but then you have to lobby either the county, the town, the village, the school district to enact it. But just giving the opportunity to allow them to do it. So that was a good one, and it was a good exercise in civics in terms of how it works, how you function, and trying to organize and get veterans to school board meetings to talk about why that would be important. And particularly with this, if it's an assessment, you're not increasing taxes, but you are changing the distribution of what people need to pay. It can be one of those things, but that'll be interesting because now it'll be an opportunity for those auxiliary officers and others that care about it to then go to their town board meetings and ask their town to opt into that. And maybe it will spur some people to get involved in the auxiliary police. Something that I learned is that Clarkstown and in Rockland County, you have some really robust auxiliary police that complement the police department. So it's a major savings to taxpayers, but it's not common throughout the state. And maybe this will spur more auxiliary departments across the state. So that could be a big win. So good luck. We'll see what happens.
What you were saying about the frustration level on getting bills passed. When we all watched that Saturday morning commercial on how a bill becomes a law, they made it so easy. Now it's you have so many. When you're on the other side, there's so many hoops and hurdles you got to go through to get, like as Pat said, to get your priority list. You put in your priority list, and then it gets delayed. I had a bill a couple of years ago that got vetoed, the Orangetown Preservation Bill that the governor actually signed 2 weeks ago. So Assemblyman Weider and I were happy. But that's an experience in and of itself. But the communication's not always a two-way conversation back and forth to find out when and if your bills are going to get passed.
So, Senator, that's a great example. Could you tell us about that preservation bill that it was vetoed by the governor?
It was first drafted by, it was a campaign idea by Teresa Kenny a number of years ago.
That's a supervisor in
Orangetown. At the time, Assemblyman Mike Lawler, now Congressman, wrote a bill in the Assembly that allows the town of Orangetown to basically assess a transfer tax and or accept other monetary or land donations into a trust fund, it's like a land trust. And the governor, I think, had a misunderstanding as to what this bill's intent and purpose was. She compared it to a bill that was really controversial in Orange County, really had nothing to do with it. So she vetoed it, and that was Assemblyman McGowan at the time, and myself had passed it in 23. So in 2024, again, I passed it in the Senate. The Assembly didn't pass it. This year, again, we passed it in both houses, the Senate and the Assembly. But we had gotten some buy-in. We got letters of support, not only from the environmental groups, river keepers, and all of the other environmental groups, but we also spoke with people in the community in Ramapo to give us letters of support too, because we wanted to really confront and really challenge the reasons why the governor originally vetoed it, and she signed the same exact bill this year that she vetoed 2 years with no changes at all. So we were happy that the lobbying effort over 2 years, getting various letters of support, as you know, letters of support on bills, especially from key people throughout the state, I think are very important to getting any bill passed, especially bills that may may be deemed as controversial, which this one wasn't, but we had to at least answer the questions why she vetoed it, because it's not common practice to pass it for her to sign a bill that she vetoed with
Right.
any changes. So we were happy to get that done for the residents of Orangetown. I know the town board was very much on board with it, and we were very happy to accommodate their request.
The what the senator said, I think, is true. I think they don't add the line where you have to haunt central staff in order to get the legislation passed and filed and to the floor. You assume as a new member, okay, we're going to file a bill. It's good on the merits, and hopefully it will get slated on a committee, and you'll eventually make it to the floor. And you try to find a senator who'll be willing to carry it. Senator Weber and I have a lot of bills that we have jointly. Sometimes you'll jump on a Senate bill, so it's not like we're always on the same bill together. But then you have to nag people in Albany in the Capitol in order to get things moving and throw in. And this is the only budget I've seen, but throw in a late budget by a month or more, and then the legislation grinds to a halt, and no one's doing anything except for focusing on the budget. And you're like, well, why can't we just pass the easy bills now? But that's not how it works, and that's probably not how it worked since Teddy Roosevelt's days.
So Pat, you didn't like gaveling out at 4 o'clock in the morning in June?
Yeah, no.
Those were tough. David, you probably have better stories than we do because you were so tight in terms of the numbers when you came in and throughout the
Yeah.
process. As Assemblyman Carroll said, we're having a late budget really compressed the time to get legislative items done, and that was really a stressful time, a late night every night time in June, trying to get probably over 1,000 bills passed in a matter of a couple of days.
Yeah, I've noticed that it's almost like a strategy of sleep deprivation where they'll keep you in the chamber, for hours. And so you're just like, okay, I don't care anymore. I just want to go home. But it really can wear on you. But I was thinking,
I'll tell you something
Yeah,
funny, and Pat, you
please.
may have had the same experience. Our conference wanted me to debate a bill, so I had to debate one of the last bills at like 3:45 in the morning, and I think I said, I don't know if it's yesterday or today yet. I don't even know where we are.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these bills are being debated publicly in the middle of the night. But another thing is that the Capitol, it belongs to the residents of New York, and anybody can go. You don't need a special pass. You just go in through security, and you can go and sit in the Senate gallery, the Assembly chamber right there. Watch the laws being passed right there. Maybe try to catch a senator or an assembly member as they're walking off the floor. It's something that I think a lot of people don't realize. And one of the things that I really try to take advantage of from my experience, if I didn't serve in the Senate, I wouldn't know. And now you guys know, you'll see me up there just hanging out because that's where the action is. And you get a lot of intel and a lot of information. And you don't have to be an elected official. You don't have to be any special status. Anyone can go and really participate, which is something that I think a lot of people don't recognize. They know it, but they feel, oh, can I go there in that room? Am I allowed in there? And you just don't know what you don't know, right? There's so many things that I want to talk to you guys about, but I know we only have a little bit more time. I was thinking maybe you could tell us, if appropriate, of a priority for you guys individually for the upcoming session. It could be a big picture issue or an individual bill that you're working on. Is there something you'd like to share with us in terms of what you're working on, and then maybe how you're going to approach it to try to get it accomplished this year?
I'm sorry. I don't want to step on toes, Bill.
Okay.
But I think that again, harkening back to the start of our conversation, this is my second session, so I think that going in to session, I think that I've learned to advocate from the start for the bills we want passed and find those right people in bill drafting and the edits and whatnot, and programming council, which is the attorneys and the folks who vet the bills to see if they actually can happen. I think from the start I'm going to work with them. The bearing, I'm not getting my bearings as much anymore. But an interesting bill we filed recently involves bereavement leave and kind of expanding the use of sick leave for folks who are dealing with a loss in their family to include even loss of pregnancy or we've heard stories of people who have foster children, who are they're fostering children for extended periods of time. In the bill, we put over 6 months. But, when that child leaves, and obviously we want what's best for the child, and they might return to someone else, another family member or whatnot. But the people who have had and raised that child, like they deal with a loss, and we want them to have, it's not going to help. It's not going to be an instantaneous help, but like to have people get some time off of work, and employers give them that time to kind of like just to take a moment for themselves and kind of assess their health and mental health after a loss of so we kind of wanted to expand that. So that's one of the bills we're putting in. We're kind of in the and David, this happened with you, and I'll ask the senator as well. I mean, we're kind of in the all right. What bills do we want to put in? Let's think about some things, and and I heard that my predecessor times two removed Ken Zabrowski Sr., who I didn't have the pleasure to meet, but served in Rockland County and in the Assembly. He actually on his business card used to have something that said, do you have an idea about a bill? And he'd hand them out so people can say, because you never know, David. I think you were the king of finding things that just make sense and putting it in for legislation because no one had thought to make it a law, and for the good. And I think that we're always looking for new bills, but that bereavement leave is kind of something that hits us all near and dear. And all of my bills, I think I'm going to really work them from the start and not realize that the process, the conveyor belt doesn't move unless you kind of like push it. So
Yeah.
I'm going to work on that this session.
So how did that bill come to fruition? Was that a constituent that shared a story with you?
Yeah, the foster
group, an article you read? What? Yeah.
The foster child piece was the part that someone who works closely with the office was sharing because they foster children, and they've literally had one baby that they've raised this child, and there's a possibility because it's still in the court system now that they would welcome this child to their home forever, but there's a possibility that a great uncle or something might come in on the scene not knowing this child, and all of a sudden whatever the court decides, obviously that's how it works, but that's a loss for that family. But if all of us of a certain age, if you have families, you hear stories or they happen in your own lives of folks losing pregnancies by way of miscarriage or elsewise. So I think that kind of just getting that in the law itself, all those are losses. When your uncle dies or someone else passes away, a great aunt or grandmother, that's kind of a given. People know that they can take that bereavement leave. But when they suffer these other losses that might not be identified in the legislation, I don't think employers, and I think sometimes there's a reluctance by an employee to take that leave, but we want them to know, no, you have this right to take this time. Everyone needs to kind of reassess and focus on their own mental health when these losses happen. And so it was to answer your question, David, combination of the two. I think we all have stories of people with losses, whether it be the loss of pregnancy or whatnot, and then someone very close to our office deals with the foster child situation.
That's great.
That sounds like a great bill, Pat, and that's great that you're carrying
Thank
it. The one thing that I learned, David, coming in 2023, there were a lot of pre-existing bills. Obviously, some of them were yours, some of them were my predecessor. Which a lot of them were great. They hadn't moved, but I introduced them as well. The one thing I learned maybe in the first year that I did better in the second year was really I put in bills that I really want to focus on getting passed. Like I said earlier, this year I had 14 bills passed, 12 got passed through both houses, which I think is great. But there are two that didn't make it through the assembly. So that was kind of frustrating in terms of what I wanted to accomplish, especially with the other two bills. That one of them was a statewide bill for that will mandate that high schools have to allow the trade unions to come in to talk about the trades to kids. I thought that was a good bill. It had bipartisan support, passed the Senate, but got kind of pushed to the side a little bit, or at least delayed in the assembly. So I learned over the first year and then into last year to really focus on bills. I think what Pat was saying is you really want to advocate for and push the bills that you think you realistically can get done through both houses, because in the end, right, you want to pass bills that get signed into law. Some of the stuff that we'll be working on, and I'm sure Assemblyman Carroll, and I'm sure David, you had the same process. We have so many people that come through, talk about, especially the towns and villages, local bills of interest that, have to either get renewed or they have new items that they want put in, and we have to get, local letters
Home rule.
home rule, local letters of support for those bills. So I'm sure we're going to have a bunch of those as well. I know Pat and I have talked about putting together this universal design bill for disabled people. We had really gotten that idea from Carlos Martinez at Bridges, and I think I know talking to you, David, in the past. A lot of the ideas, a lot of bills that you get are from personal experience of not only your constituents come into you, maybe it's a senior forum or a student forum, or these people come up with great ideas and say, "Hey, why is this not a law?" And you're saying, "Well, it is a law." And then you look and it's not a law. You're like,
Hmm.
"Well, it should have been a law." So
Mm-hmm.
there's so many things that we hear from. There was one person in particular that reached out to me, and we have a bill drafted related to. Um, the Irish potato famine, which is part of the curriculum in New York. There hasn't been an audit done to see if it's really being taught properly. So there's been a big advocacy out of the Irish community to talk about the state doing it. I know a few years ago the state did an audit on, I think, the Holocaust teaching in the curriculum as well. So there's precedent for that. So, ideas come to us all the time. We're going to go through those. We're going to prioritize them. And like I said, I'm going to put together a list of realistic bills that I think can get passed and really prioritize them, and maybe not just throw 20 or 30 bills in and really sometimes get bills passed that you don't really want as a priority, but sometimes there's a lottery system and sometimes the bills just get passed for no reason. Then just they get passed through a committee.
Yeah, that's something that people might not know that New York, we actually have the most bills introduced than any other legislature in the country. And right now it's hovering about 11,000 bills. That's just in one chamber. So you have identical bills because you have to have a matching bill in each chamber. So you have over 20,000 bills introduced in New York. And one of the things that I always enjoyed as a lawmaker is that there's no restriction, that if you have an idea, you could put a bill in. Other states, like I know Colorado, they're limited to 5 bills a session. So they
Right.
really have to, be careful and think about what bills they want to introduce. Where, as we know, if someone has an idea, we can put it in. Makes now as a government affairs consultant, people's hair is lit on fire when they see a bill introduced. They're like, "Oh my God, that'll kill us," or whatever, and not knowing the seriousness of the bill. Does this have a chance? Is this going to move? All of that, and that's something that's very important and a reason why people have to take that extra step in knowing, okay, what's the seriousness of this. But with that said, in your experience for both of you, what do you find are the effective ways to advocate, to lobby? What have you found from whether it's individuals, advocacy groups? What has moved you from what you've seen, and what gets your attention? Because I always tell people, I mentioned the 10,000 bills that you guys have to deal with. You're drinking from a fire hose. Any type of group association you can imagine, it exists. Every day, I'm still learning about new associations and groups, and they're very interesting. But what have you found are some of the ways that you've been impressed, or you've taken notice, or you've been kind of put off by actions? Anything you guys could share with us?
Well, I think what I would say is we try and take as many meetings as possible, not only from the advocacy groups up in Albany, but advocacy groups that come through our district office as well. I try and being on the committees that I'm on, I really try and take a deep dive, at least to the extent possible, to really get at least a high level summary of what the bill's about, and looking at each bill in with an open mind, but always looking at it from the perspective of, is this good for the residents of Rockland County? So I always keep that in the back of my mind. I think I have a pretty good understanding of my district, which is very diverse. Um, and what one issue that may be well in one part of the district may not play well in another side of the district. I try and balance that off, but I always like to go in with information, and I like having the information, especially on controversial bills, to know, what I'm saying yes to, what I'm saying no to, and why. And I always like to at least keep a log of why I make a decision that I do. But I always keep Rockland and my district kind of in the back of my mind.
The I think David, again with the precursor that is my second year of session, but I think that focusing on the chairs of the committees, really like pressing them to move bills, or I have several chairs who my chair Rosick, who's Consumer Affairs. I'm on the Consumer Affairs Committee, and she knew I was looking for bills last year. She gave me she said, look, the lemon law hasn't been updated in New York since 1984. The lemon law for used cars. She's like, take a bite on that, and bite out a lemon. I feel like I did that unintentionally, but it's a bill that we put in. It kind of lost time, but we're really going to push it this session. But I think the chairs. The other thing, and I'm not sure if it happens in the Senate, but you see people, trying to get their colleagues to sign on, and certainly we want to sign on bills. But sometimes it seems like certain members are obsessed with getting as many sign-ons as possible, and they'll go around the chamber with these little gold pieces of paper, sign on, sign on, sign on, sign on, and it may have some weight to some folks, but we've also been told that it doesn't necessarily hold weight. You'll get an advocate saying that 76 of your colleagues have signed on to this bill, it's going to pass, and that bill doesn't even make it to committee, never mind pass. So it's kind of like again, and not to beat a dead horse, it's like a balancing situation. I think you need to talk to central staff. I think you need to talk to the leadership of the House you serve in, and also the committee chairs. I think if they're on your side, they can really help you move a bill. And obviously, having a few co-sponsors, you're not, Assembly Member Carroll is the only one who thinks this bill should be passed. I feel like you want a few of them, but like sometimes, the popularity contest of bill sponsors kind of gets a little bit crazy at times.
Well, guys, this has been fantastic. This hour flew by for me, and you guys have been so generous with your time. I know how demanding your schedules are, so I want to thank you both for joining us. And I really implore everyone to reach out and Google these gentlemen and follow them on social media. Sign up for their email newsletter. They have a wealth of information, and that's Senator Bill Weber and Assemblyman Pat Carroll. Thank you so much for your time, and want to thank everybody for joining us today. And please continue to stay involved with the ILR Alumni Board and our Government Affairs Affinity group. We're planning many events over the next year. So if you have any ideas, please reach out to me, and love to work with you on ways that we can really grow the Government Affairs Affinity group and make sure we have a strong network throughout the Cornell alumni. So Senator Bill Weber and Assemblyman Pat Carroll, thank you so much for your time. We've really enjoyed it. This has been extremely valuable for all of us. So we appreciate it and hope to talk to you real soon.